My name is Jennifer Opal. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a DevOps engineer with HelloSign at Dropbox. I'm a Neurodiveristy and Inclusion Advocate, which I'll talk a little bit more about later on in the talk. And I also have described as a multi-award winning blogger and speaker. And one of my most recent wins was being named as one of the most influential women in tech in the UK by computerweekly.com for my work in advocacy, neurodiversity, and amongst other things. But to be honest, I didn't nominate myself, so I have no idea, but I'm really happy about it. So I'm just going to make a start and just, yeah. So my talk is called The Importance of Being an Ally and Why It Matters. And I really wanted to just I chose this topic because I think that is something very important, not just to me, but I also think it's something that's very important in the space of engineering. And I wanted to kind of give my experience and use my story to try and also educate and give some insight, but also hopefully you will have some questions yourself and something you can take with you. So yeah, so let's make a start. So my journey into tech, very unconventional. It's been all over the place. I have dropped out of uni a good 3 or 4 times. I don't even remember. But student loans have not forgotten that I owe them money still. So I got my intro to tech through Code First Girls, which is a social enterprise that works to provide free education to bring women and non-binaries into tech. And that's how I found out about it. I then, in November 2018, got onto a program with BT in collaboration with Code First Girls. And it was a course with 30 other women that was teaching us how to code on a full-time basis. It was a very intense experience because at the time I was also at university and in my final year of my degree, which I was already failing at. Yeah, so that's kind of how I got my start from before getting in my first tech role. And transitioning to February 2019, I was given a job offer by BT, and I was given a job offer to be a software engineer in test automation team. And I decided to pack up and leave London and just move all the way to Belfast. And I loved it. It was a great experience, great city, beautiful, highly recommend it. Not the most diverse, but I did have a great experience there all the same. Met some amazing people. And then this year, I ended up leaving Belfast and coming back to London and got a job as a DevOps engineer, which is where I'm currently at. And I've been working there since March this year. So my journey was unconventional because I didn't think that tech was something that I wanted and knew about. I wasn't knowledgeable about it. Coding was not something I was familiar with. I didn't grow up in a family that had engineers or knew what coding was, or doctors and lawyers and things like that. So this was all very, very new. And at the time when I first discovered coding, I was 27. And prior to that, I was pursuing a career to be a psychodynamic therapist. So complete switch, but definitely worth it for me. For anyone that's not familiar with HelloSign or with Dropbox, so HelloSign is an e-signature product, and it allows you to sign documents simply and securely. And Dropbox may be something that some of you are already familiar with, but for those that are not, it's basically a virtual workspace. So it works to just make things easier for you when you're working and encourages collaboration. You can use tools to kind of integrate with it, some Zoom, Slack, etc. So that's kind of a bit of a breakdown of what they are. So what is DevOps? This is like I don't really feel like there's a definition. Everyone has their own experience or own interpretation of what it is. And I feel like I found so many different definitions of DevOps, and I think many can agree. These are the ones that I have found, or this is one that I found that aligns more with me and what we currently do within HelloSign, and also my definition. So the definitions there I've written is that the practice of operations and development engineers participating together in the entire service lifecycle, from design through to the development process to production support. And that's a definition from the Agile admin. But I also felt like, as much as I like that definition, I felt like there was more to it for me. And for me, my definition is that it's the culture that brings inclusiveness and human collaboration in order to create efficient practices of operations and development from the design stages to security, production, and the release. And I really want to emphasize culture because I feel like that plays a huge part in the implementation of DevOps. And I think it's just a huge part in engineering as a whole. And I just wanted to explain a bit more as to why that is. And hopefully we'll be able to, if you have questions about that, we'll be able to answer some in the end. But hopefully you'll be able to understand my perspective on this. So my journey into DevOps, very random. I call it an accidental, accident, a purposeful accident even. And it was quite random because I'd never heard of DevOps and actually ended up becoming a DevOps big data engineer. This is where I was working before. So when I started as a junior software engineer in test automation, I pretty much got bored quite quickly. We're doing the same things over and over again. And I just wanted to learn so much more. Like I was ready and like hungry to just learn something completely different. And then back then it was like everyone was talking about big data, and I decided to kind of like eavesdrop and shadow the big data team. And I was so fascinated by what they were doing and decided to join them. And then Christmas came round, I went on leave, everyone did. I come back and it's like, oh yeah, we're not big data engineers, we're DevOps big data engineers. I'm like, what is that? What is DevOps? So I kind of fell into it accidentally. So these are just some of the tools, and forgive me if the list is not that extensive. Part of my disabilities, I have dyspraxia and ADHD as well as dyslexia. So sometimes my memory isn't the greatest, so I'm incredibly forgetful. But these are the ones that I did remember from the top of my head of some of the tools that we used when we were there. So one of the tools for data pipeline orchestration, we use Apache Uzi. And for those who don't know what that is basically a workflow scheduler system. So it's used to kind of manage Hadoop jobs. And for those that aren't familiar with Hadoop, it's a framework that allows you to process large data sets. We also use GitLab, which is what we were beginning to start using around the time I left the company. And we were starting to look at using GitLab for CI/CD pipelines just before I left. We also use tools like Grafana as well for logging and for data monitoring tools basically as well. And then from transitioning from that into HelloSign at Dropbox as DevOps engineer this year, it was completely different. There was a lot of tools here that I had never used before, never heard of before. And I was really fascinated by everything that they were doing and how things worked. But it was all very new to me. And I think that even with all of these tools here, the way that I was able to learn culture played a huge part in how I was able to learn and gain experience and understanding of all the different tools that we're using, and why I decided to join the team. So I'll give a brief little breakdown of some of the tools just in case some are not familiar with these tools. So we have Puppet, which is a configuration management tool, and that was developed in order to automate infrastructure management and configuration. And then we have Terraform, which allows infrastructure to be used and to be made as code in a simple way and a human readable way. Then GitHub, I know many are probably already familiar with that. So it's a basic cloud-based platform that developers and engineers use to manage and store their repos. And then we have the ELK stack there. So that stands for Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana. And Elasticsearch is a search and analytics tool engine. Logstash is a server-side data processing pipeline, and Kibana lets users just visualize all that data that's coming in on Elasticsearch. So those are just a few examples there. More than welcome to screenshot, and I'm more than happy to also send the slides afterwards if you'd like to have this as reference to use if you want to research anything. So yeah, so this is the one thing that is incredibly important to me. And one thing about DevOps and about tech and engineering as a whole, that in my opinion, in order for it to be successful, there's two key things that I've written here, which is collaboration and culture. Without the two, whether it be in engineering or in DevOps, I don't really believe, personally, I don't believe that we can give our best and do our best in terms of how DevOps works. So some examples that maybe just think about it. So in terms of collaboration, can we really give our best and give our ideas and contribute to team meetings and different tools that you may have come across and want to share that with the team? Can we really do that if the culture isn't there? Can we do that if the workplace doesn't feel safe for marginalized groups? Can we do that if the culture and the work environment isn't safe or supportive or inclusive? Those are the key things that allow someone to just come into the team and be their full self and say, I feel good about being here. I feel good about coming into work. I enjoy contributing to this team because I feel seen and I feel respected, despite how different I may be from someone else. But the culture of creating inclusivity is incredibly important. I think that plays a huge part for DevOps to be successful and implemented well within the teams, as well as organizations that we work for. So the title of the talk talks about allyship and what is an ally. And let me just give some brief things about that, as you can see here. So an ally is action. It's not just words. An ally isn't a flex. An ally is someone that you can, oh, sorry, that was a typo there. An ally isn't performative, and an ally is someone that allows himself to be held accountable, which is what I should have said. Being an ally, it doesn't exempt you from being held accountable from those who you align yourself with. The whole purpose of being an ally is that you're aligning yourself with a community or communities that you don't fully understand, or you don't walk in their path, and you don't have an understanding of their experience, but you stand with them in understanding who they are and trying to understand who they are and supporting who they are in the various layers of their identity. You're an ally because you're still also allowing yourself to continue to learn. You're not perfect, you don't know everything, but you're allowing yourself to continue to learn about all of these different things that you may not fully understand, but you will support. You are coming into these communities from the outside, and you're coming in. So anyone can say they're an ally, but does your actions demonstrate that? So if you think about within your team, have you ever had a situation where you wanted to say a joke, or maybe a colleague wants to say a joke, but then they're like, I want to say a joke, but I'm not sure if I should say it. But if you're hesitant, it's because you know it could cause offense. For some people, it might be that case where they'd be like, some people might feel some type of way about that. So have you ever held that person to account? If someone has said a joke that's caused offense to somebody else, have you stood with them? Have you taken that person to the side and or even held yourself accountable to apologize to that person? And even for me, like I've had a joke said, not even a joke, but just like a comment made about reading. And with dyslexia, I struggled to read in black and white. And they came to me and just apologized for that comment. Although I didn't even think it was offensive, but they held themselves to account. And that's what allyship is. And that was someone in my team. And it made me feel that my identity and who I am as a person was seen and was remembered and was respected. And that is what allows me to come into work and come into a team and feel confident in being able to contribute. And it sounds so small for some people, but it's incredibly important. So why do we need allies in tech? There's so many reasons. So many reasons. And these are some of the two main things. And I'm speaking from personal experience too. I think it's incredibly important to have someone that will stand beside you, that will have your back. And when I say tech, I've mentioned DevOps already, but I say tech and I also say DevOps because I think that all in all, allies in tech as a whole is incredibly important. So whether it be your team is engineering, security, product management, whatever it is, even if it's just that you are trying to keep the door open for marginalized groups to get into tech, it makes all the difference, every single part of that. But having allies within your team is so impactful. It makes a difference to how they perform. It makes a difference to your mental health. It makes a difference to your confidence in being able to contribute to the team. It opens doors as well to have conversations about inclusion, but to understand inclusion, but also to practice inclusion. It makes people within your team feel seen, they feel valued for who they are in all their forms. And it also helps helps their mental health. And I'll say that for me, the amount of times that I wasn't acknowledged sometimes, and this wasn't like within my current team, but in past working experiences and past workplaces that I've worked in, when I was not seen, or when I wasn't acknowledged, or when comments were made because I couldn't read, or I was forgetful, or I didn't remember things, or I asked someone to repeat something that they probably repeated to me an hour ago and I just have no recollection of it. It was incredibly important that they understood that this is how they're making me feel, but it can get exhausting to constantly have to teach and help someone understand why we need them or need that person to educate themselves. It's exhausting having to educate others about why you're different and how you're different. I was diagnosed, and this is like a personal, and I hope this doesn't like trigger anyone's emotion, but I was diagnosed with anxiety earlier this year. And the breaking point was working in an environment where I was the only one. I was the only Black person. I was the only Black woman. And it was apparent. And I wasn't told about that. I wasn't informed about that. It became exhausting where it's like every day going to, for example, the canteen, and everyone looks at you. And you just know you're different. And sometimes they may not realize that they're doing it or just staring. But when they're doing that, you suddenly start to feel small sometimes. You start to feel so different that you stick out so much that you just don't want to be seen anymore. And that can come into how you perform and how you contribute to the teams that you're in. And it definitely had an impact on me. I went from being confident and excited, and slowly my voice just started to diminish. It's important that I feel safe at work in everything that I am. And having allies within the team was much, much, much more important because I'll be working with them the most. And I hope that has, for me, just sharing that, it kind of gives an insight and understanding of what inclusion means and how, and just an example of just how beneficial that could be and how all of this makes all of the difference. So I'm going to double back a little bit. And I want to double back because I know that this is like something that you normally say at the beginning of a slide. It's like, let me tell you about myself. But I wanted to just talk about this a little bit and about me and where I came from so that you understand my identity and understand my story, and also be able to understand um, how allyship and how inclusion will all play a part and how it all helps um, within tech, within your teams. So my family, myself, were originally from the Democratic Republic of Congo, and if you don't know where that is, it's literally right in the middle of Africa. But I myself, I'm a Black woman, born and raised in West London. I am the eldest daughter and the only daughter with 3 younger brothers, so I'm one of 4. I was diagnosed with dyslexia, dyspraxia, and ADHD as an adult. And I knew that I struggled with reading from when I was a child, but I was always told that I was bright and energetic. But the signs of dyslexia wasn't picked up for me, I guess because I was bright and energetic. This is something that's actually quite common with a lot of women specifically, and also a lot of black girls, young Black girls, that are often diagnosed much later in life, because the signs in girls and Black girls too are missed. And I also grew up in a single parent home from the age of 14. I came out as queer in October, so this is like last month. Came out as queer in October 2021. And it was a liberating moment of my life. Absolutely scary, but liberating. And all of this contributes to something else. Like, it all contributes to me. And let me just help you understand why that is. This is everything that I'm bringing into the team, into the practice of DevOps, into the practice of engineering, and into tech. I need a lot of allies. There are multiple layers to me as an individual, and I'm just one person. So many different layers of who I am and my experiences in life and how I view the world. That those perspectives can contribute to how I can contribute to the team, how I can give different perspectives in terms of solutions, ideas, and it helps the team. When you have people in your team that are all have same identities, right? They're all the same. Everyone's the same. No one is different. You sometimes end up doing the same thing because you see the world exactly the same. But when you bring someone in that sees the world differently and learn how to make them feel that their opinions are valid and their experiences are needed, you'll be able to kind of think of other things and be like, wait, I never thought of that. Why did I not think about that before? I love this perspective. Let's go with that. And that happens a lot where I'm currently working too, with my team, that I'll give an idea and I'll give an opinion. And it's like, I never thought of that. That's a good idea. Let's work with this. It all helps. It helps the team do better. It helps the team collaborate better. It helps the company do better. It helps the customer, the user using our product do better and enjoy what we're doing because we're giving different perspectives. We're thinking about so many different layers to our product that we may not have thought about before. I know that there's a lot of words here, and I want to just kind of explain a little bit about what each of them are. So, dyspraxia is a common disorder that affects movement and coordination. So some of the side effects are memory loss. I struggle to walk in a straight line, so I'm considered quite, quote unquote, clumsy. There's also some overlap as well with some of the symptoms of ADHD, which is a neurobiological and a neurodevelopmental disorder. What a tongue twister there. And I also take medication to help with that. So my brain is just going at 1,000 miles an hour, and sometimes it can get so overwhelming for me. So for some people, they take medication, some people they don't. And the reason why I mention it, and I don't have to mention it, but I mention it is because it presents differently in different people. There's not a one-size-fits-all when it comes to disabilities, when it comes to learning difficulties, when it comes to gender and sexuality, mental health. There's not a one-size-fits-all. Everyone is different. Dyslexia, which is maybe something that many may be familiar with, it's a common learning difficulty that can cause problems with reading, writing, and spelling. So I've already said, black and white, miss me. I will not be able to read it. Everything moves around the page a lot. And I need to have a color or a calm color behind white text in order for me to read it. I don't have textbooks. I used to, but I would read a paragraph and not remember what I wrote. I would read one line and suddenly skip and not know where I'm going, and it just got physically overwhelming. And neurodivergent, that's something that I use a lot. Reason being is that it's really hard to kind of describe yourself as having all these three things when you have one word that can just define everything. It was a word that was coined by the sociologist Judy Singer, and it refers to the many different ways our brains work. So not just in terms of the ones that I've mentioned, in terms of dyspraxia, dyslexia, and ADHD, but also Asperger's, autism. There's so many, dyscalculia. There's so many different ways our brains are different. This also comes up to another thing, intersectionality. It may not be a word that many are familiar with, but it plays a part in inclusion, and it plays a huge part in ensuring that you realize that within people within your own team, there's layers to them that can make them different from you, but you can still stand with them and make an effort to learn and understand who they are. So intersectionality is something that I believe was created by Kimberly Crenshaw. The term means a complex and cumulative way in which the effects of multiple forms of discrimination combine, overlap, or intersect, especially in the experiences of marginalized individuals or groups. So if there's ever a situation where, for example, last year with the protest regarding the murder of George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, that was my Black identity. But no one asked me how I was. No one asked me if I was okay. I had to reach out and find other Black people to ask them if they were okay and for them to ask me if I was okay. But I wasn't asked that. And that's the importance of understanding allyship. It's not just about listening and trying to understand. It's about putting actions to those words, because it plays a part in what you bring to your team. It plays a part in how I come and how I perform in every way. It will either shut me down, or it'll also completely shut me off. Then there's other situations you think about, anything affecting women. I'm now a woman, and I have to think about how that affects me. We already know in tech that women are incredibly underrepresented. That's something that I have to think about. I have to think about how that affects me and what I can do as a woman to help other women in tech, outside of tech, trying to get into tech, the importance of keeping the door open. And then in terms of me being neurodivergent, whole nother level, And then it's my sexuality, a whole other story too. Allyship is incredibly important. And action with allyship is what's the most powerful thing. No one wants to be an ally and find themselves not being an ally. And when I say that, it's that sometimes there's a fine line where it comes from either being you're an ally or you are tokenizing someone. And that's something that many people have experienced, especially those of marginalized groups in tech and within DevOps. And I know that because I talk to a lot of people, and I talk to a lot of people outside of within tech or on Twitter and things like that. We know the tech Twitter community is just rampant. There's always something going on, but the conversation is always present. That a lot of the time, those that are from underrepresented groups or marginalized groups in tech that enter different teams find that because they're different, it's now their responsibility to suddenly do the work to make change. But that's not how it works. That's not allyship. That's performative. That's tokenism. And it's exhausting. I encourage you to think about how you can be an ally to people within your own team, how you can stand with people that you work with, that you respect, that you talk to almost every day, depending on how many calls you have. I hope that you don't have too many calls. I can't imagine how exhausting that is. But I hope that you're able to take the time to understand, but also to educate yourself. There's no harm in asking questions, but don't depend on them to teach you everything. Just as in tech as a whole, I can't depend on someone to hold my hand throughout my tech career. If we decide that if I'm going to use Spinnaker for the first time, I can't expect someone in my team to hold my hand and give me a tutorial on everything. I have a responsibility to educate myself, but they are a resource. But it starts with me. It's not dependent on anyone else. I want to just share some resources. I'm coming to the end of the talk, which is actually like a lot quicker than I thought it would be. So these are just some books. And if there are some books that you would like to recommend, please feel free to leave a comment and share that with others. And we can educate each other on being a better ally, not just within our teams, but also outside of our teams. Because when allyship is practiced with action, it makes all the difference within our teams, within our organizations, and also practicing that in our day-to-day lives. It doesn't switch off once you check out of work at 5. I work nights. I work in US time, so I work fully remote. So it's not really 5 p.m. for me. It's more like 11 p.m. or midnight. But I'm a night owl, so that's just how it works for me. But I enjoy it. So some of the terms that I mentioned, like I said, in terms of intersectionality, even queerness, neurodivergent, there's a lot of things that I mentioned today. So I'm going to just read through, just for accessibility as well, just read through the list of resources here. But like I said also, that if you'd like me to send you the slides, I'll be more than happy to do that as well, if you'd like to have this as text. So the first book is Intersectionality: Key Concepts by Patricia Hill Collins. On intersectionality, Essential Writings by Kimberly Crenshaw. Kimberly Crenshaw also did a talk that is currently on YouTube. I think it has like 1 million views. It's powerful, and I would highly recommend that you watch that. So if you search for The Urgency of Intersectionality on YouTube, you should get a TED Talk by Kimberly Crenshaw. Then there's the art of showing up, how to be there for yourself and for your people. And that's by Rachel Winkle Miller. Demystifying Disability, What to Know, What to Say, and How to Be an Ally by Emily Lado, which is spelled Ladau. The Leader's Guide to Unconscious Bias by Pamela Fuller, Mark Murphy, and Anne Chow. Blind Spot, Hidden Biases of Good People by Mazarin, which is spelled Mahzarin, Banerjee, which is spelled Banaji, and Anthony G. Greenwald. And the last book, The Phoenix Project, which is really popular recommendation for people that would like to learn more about DevOps, but it's also a really big book, and I'm still reading it and I haven't finished it. But like I said, reading is really difficult for me sometimes. I do get overwhelmed by it, but I do use a Kindle now, so that helps. All of the books that I mentioned also come in Kindle format, and I just wanted to mention that just in case there are people that do use screen readers or struggle to read text that would like to use a Kindle instead. So I know that's more neurodivergent friendly as well. So these are just a few ways that you can connect with me. So my website, jenniferopal.co, my Twitter, _JenniferOpal, my LinkedIn. Guess how you want to guess that, Jennifer Opal. And you can connect with me. More than welcome to ask questions. Please be forgiving if I don't respond straight away. As I mentioned, I do have anxiety, and something that I'm learning to manage and live with. And sometimes I do get overwhelmed by messages, and I have to prioritize my mental health. So I hope that from everything that I've mentioned today, that you take that and understand that you have a responsibility to educate yourself. It makes a huge difference within the practice of DevOps, within the practice of engineering, within your teams, collaboration, the culture of your organizations, and how everyone will be able to work together and be their full selves. It makes a huge difference. We can educate you as those that are of marginalized groups. We can educate you in the sense where we can show you how you can support us, and we can show you how you can work with us. But you have to do the action. And also be respectful of the fact that some people just don't want to educate. We've been marginalized so much, it's exhausting. And some of us are tired, and that's okay. And don't be offended if we say no. So I hope that the resources are useful for you. I'll find a way of sharing it. And as I said, you're more than welcome to connect with me if you have any questions about this. So thank you so much.
Wow. Thank you so much, Jennifer. That was absolutely incredible. And I truly, truly mean that. I know that you will soon be having many, many requests to connect with you. That was super informative. In fact, actually, one of the comments said, bringing all these issues to the fore for the betterment of IT is great. Everything is not about coding. And I believe that is really, really true. So we do have actually a lot of questions that have
Oh, wow.
I'm sure people are super interested. This doesn't get spoken about enough. So actually the first question is to do with Code First Girls. How important was this opportunity for you? Do you think you would have found a way into tech if not for this?
Yeah, so would I have found a way into tech if it wasn't for Code First Girls? No, I wouldn't. As I said, in terms of my upbringing, my parents came to the UK in 1990, year I was born, best year ever. I don't care what anyone tells me. They came to the UK year I was born, and they had to survive. They'd had to take on jobs where they just needed to be able to provide for us as a family. They didn't think about careers, and there was no one that taught them about the value of education and the value of the types of awards they can get access to. I discovered Code First Girls in 2017, and this is when I went back to uni to study business and French language after graduating with a certificate in counselling to do in psychodynamic therapy and counselling. I turned down an offer from Goldsmiths, and I thought, yeah, I want to be a therapist. And then I'm like, no, I don't want to be a therapist. I'm the one that needs therapy. And I decided not to do it. But I would not have found coding. I didn't know what coding was. I only heard about coding. I'm sure that everyone's probably familiar with a movie or something where it's like someone's breaking down some kind of firewall in like 10 seconds, and we know you can't really do that. But that's all I knew. I didn't know anything else. It's just a whole matrix of like little green characters coming down the screen. But I'm incredibly grateful because it has allowed me to be creative. And many neurodivergent minds are known for being creative and wanting to learn about different things and absorb knowledge. But like I said, it presents differently in different people, but this is how it presents for me. And I love that I'm in a space where I was able to learn a skill that will allow me to be creative, allow me to give ideas and be able to contribute that to teams, and also allow me to get access to an industry and a career that will set me up for the rest of my life. And when I get to a stage where I have children, they'll be okay because I have skills that will keep me in employment, that will never tire, that will never run away or disappear. So it's allowed me that opportunity to also get access to not just an amazing career, but also things like equity, things that I never thought that I would get access to. But it's such a valuable skill. So I do encourage like anyone, like whether it be within tech, outside of it, mention Code First Girls, mention Learning to Code, mention free code camp, get people learning about it. It really will make all the difference, and hopefully increase diversity in marginalized groups, but also inclusion, more importantly, as well.
Thank you so much. Yeah, there does seem to be a bit of an accessibility issue, but it does seem as though much is being done with a lot of the coding camps, with a lot of the other avenues into tech as well to improve this. We also had another comment from Matt Blackburn who said, "This is a great talk. I couldn't agree more that our differences and variety of perspectives, if nurtured and implemented properly, are hugely valuable to business and innovation. Collectively thinking outside the box is easier when we are each allowed to have our own box." And I think it's so true. So I suppose another question that is popping up is that you left London to go to Belfast, which is incredible. It's an amazing city for a job opportunity. So now within the pandemic, everything has completely changed. Would you still make that same decision? Do you prefer remote working or not, and why?
So there's a variety of reasons for this. I don't think for me, I would ever go back to working in a building. So I now work remotely. When I moved to Belfast, I was going into an office, and I don't regret taking that opportunity to go there. Like I said, Belfast is a beautiful city, but I also mentioned that it wasn't the most diverse. There was quite a lot of ignorance in some cases. So I wouldn't say that I would go back to office work again. I think that reason being is that going into an office environment, I felt like, even from past experiences, I felt that I was constantly having to educate a lot. And I haven't come to join any organization to educate on who I am. I've just come as myself. And I think that because of that, and because of the difficulties in trying to identify whether inclusion is something that's actually practiced or whether it's something that's said, because everyone is saying that diversity and inclusion is important to them, but is it ingrained into the culture of where you're working? A lot of us in marginalized groups, we won't find that out until we join. And then once we join the company, it's like, okay, I just realized that I'm working with people who don't, for example, in the case of someone that uses they, them pronouns, they don't think about that. They don't know what that is. They haven't educated themselves on that. They don't practice inclusion in how they talk and how they think. They don't know about Black History Month, for example. They don't know about Disability Awareness Month. So little things, but how they speak is the biggest indicator about whether inclusion is actually practiced. It's easy to say, I can do it, but a lot of the time, if the action isn't there, it's not going to work. And before you know it, majority of the time, people that are in marginalized groups tend to leave a company a lot quicker because inclusion isn't practiced. Diversity, there was a saying from, I think, Bozoma St. John, and she said diversity is being invited to a party and inclusion is being asked to dance. There's no point in inviting people to come if you're not going to see them and see them for who they fully are. And I think that me in working remotely, I feel so safe because I have an environment where I feel I can be my full self and I don't have to educate or explain all the time. And this is the experience that's happening with a lot of marginalized groups that I've spoken to. I even did a feature interview with Refinery29 with a journalist called Lola. Oh, I've forgotten her surname. But you can look that up and you'll see that there are also other accounts of other Black women specifically talking about how much they enjoy and love remote work and they won't be going back to working in the office. But it might change in the future, but that would depend on the organization and how they practice inclusion. That would make the biggest difference.
It's very, very, very true. In fact, wow, we found very similar results in our white paper that came out earlier, I think this month or at the end of last month, that actually remote working was what most developers wanted above hybrid working, above a lot of other perks and benefits. It was even more seen as something that is a given now. Like, we can remote work, I can still do the job. In fact, I can probably do the job better. So that is, yeah, I think that really echoes well. And do you have any advice as well for networking or entering a new team with anxiety, for example?
I think, like, for me, I have decided to be unapologetic. I don't care about how someone like perceives me, but I also know that for some people it's still quite uncomfortable in a lot of organizations as well, where it's uncomfortable to talk about having disabilities or having learning difficulties or needing additional support, because we're also worried and concerned about being treated differently. But I think that an inclusive team, an inclusive culture will allow you to be able to express that and then be able to ask you, what can we do to support? So I encourage, because it's like, when I was sharing about being neurodivergent myself, I need a screen reader. I need to take breaks, mental breaks, otherwise I get overwhelmed by things that I have to take a step back sometimes. I also mentioned that I take medication as well. But I had to be honest to say, this is how I work and this is what you can expect. But I'm still going to get things done. It's just, I might do it differently. And having that communication and having a team that understands allows me to come into work, go into those meetings, discussing different things we want to implement, things that we want to change. Like, even like last week, oh my God, I crashed production. It was so bad. I crashed production. And I think that's like a pinnacle point in every engineer's career. And I still felt like I was able to go into the call and just say, yeah, this is what happened, and I'm sorry, and be able to explain that and do a post-mortem and things like that. But for some people, they might feel a bit scared, or they might feel a bit wary, they might feel kind of be nervous, and it's natural. I encourage you to just be your full self, be unapologetic about any issues that you have, anything that's going on around you. Because if the team doesn't know, they're going to have expectations for you to be able to fulfill things, complete tickets, see them through. But because you have so much going on, they're thinking no one's going to know, and they can accommodate and they can try and understand. A good team supports fully, not just within the tasks and the projects that you're working on, but also with what's going on in your everyday life. They'll support and they'll understand. And if it's a case where you join a team and they're not that, you can choose to either have the conversation, hope that action comes around and wait for action. But if it's not the case, for me personally, I always say that put yourself first. Find and give your skills and experience to teams and organizations that will value you and see you in every stage of your life. You can go into a job and be great at what you do, but if the support isn't there, how do you give your best? How do you continue to learn and thrive? And in areas like, for example, in DevOps, there are tools coming out all the time. I don't even know what's going on. It's like, whoa, what's this and what's that? There's always something completely new. So you're constantly learning, but you have to have that space within yourself, and you have to be okay and have a team that supports, so that you're able to kind of give your best to your team, and also be able to grow technically within yourself as well. I hope that answers the question, because I feel like my dyslexia just kind of went.
No, that definitely answered the question. Absolutely. And even more so, I think it's really important for people, like for you to share this, because it's allowed other people to see, okay, there can be accommodations made for me. Maybe I also need a screen reader. Maybe I do need a particular type of chair. Let me inquire within my organization or my company and see if that could also be done. So I suppose the question to do with DevOps is, do you still get to code in DevOps? Are your coding skills applicable, and is it still used in this kind of role?
I find, now I don't know if it's just my team and the tools that we're using, but I find that I don't code as much as I thought I would, which I actually thought I would be coding a lot more when I joined the team. But when I joined the team, I wasn't knowledgeable on every tool that they were using, and I made that clear and said, look, I don't know a lot of these things, but I'm so eager to learn. But I find that most of the time I'm either updating code that's already present, or I am pretty much learning about the various different tools that we use and how to use them, but I don't find that I code as much. However, I do think that, like, it's also important to consider that DevOps is practiced, from what I'm understanding, DevOps is practiced differently in different organizations, different teams. So it might just be that for me, we don't code as much, but in another team, in another organization, they might code a lot. So it depends on how they implement it, and how their infrastructure is, and the responsibilities that they have, and type of product that they have. There's so many factors. But I don't find myself coding as much, which I kind of like, I don't know, like I feel like I miss coding. And I find like I have to try and like remind myself how to code. I'm like, how do I do that again? And even the other day, it was so weird. Like I was doing like a little, I don't even remember what the project was, but I Googled how to center text in HTML. And it's basically center. And I'm like, this is my life. I forgot. Like, I was like, you've got to be joking. But I just I don't code as much as I used to. But I love the fact that I get to learn more about infrastructure, about automation tools, about thinking about how to deliver on solutions, and thinking of different ideas, and learning from other people with more experience than me within the team, so that I can be better for the team, and for myself technically also. But I do miss coding though. I do wish I was coding more. Like, I don't know.
Well, it's never too, I think the one thing we can take away from your talk is it's never too late. You can always go back and do more.
Exactly.
And I'm sure we'll do more. So another question actually, and this is also something that I would really love to know. What has been your most memorable part of your journey into tech?
Yeah. Oh, it's been quite a whirlwind, because it's been so short, but it's been so incredible. And I think for me, it's when, like, I think more so memorable moments, and it's normally when I hear from people from marginalized groups or underrepresented groups that maybe have seen my YouTube video, which I no longer do YouTube. It's a lot of work, but that would see my YouTube video and they decided to learn how to code, and they get their first tech job and things like that. And it's like, wow, that's when you realize the importance of your story and keeping the door open and being able to use your experience to help others, because it helps bring people in and they're able to contribute to other teams as well. They're able to contribute to the industry. They're able to think of different ideas and collaborate and create and contribute to the DevOps culture, the tech culture, everything, and in an effort to make things better, you know, and for people to see what they have never seen. And I think that's the highlight of it. You don't realize just how telling someone and sharing your story and saying, hey, this is how I got into tech. I don't have a degree. I dropped out a few times. I experienced homelessness. I have anxiety. I'm neurodivergent. I'm a Black woman. I'm African. So many different things. And that story will resonate with someone. It will touch someone because they'll be able to see within you, like, wow, if she can do it, so can I. And it's so powerful to see how that can just encourage them to just be like, I'm ready to learn. I'm ready to just give my all and build something and get into tech and get my first role and set myself up for my future. But I feel like that's the most powerful thing, is when you hear from people that have heard your story and it inspires them to take a change and actually learn something that they probably never thought of learning before they heard from you. And that's powerful.
It's really, really powerful. And it really shows actually that everybody starts somewhere as well. Another question that we will maybe wrap up with, or maybe there's one more time for one more. What advice would you give? I just want to hear as much as I can. What advice would you give to businesses for fostering a culture of allyship in the workplace?
Right. It starts from the top. So I think what I find from my personal experience is that a lot of underrepresented groups are brought into lower level roles. So sometimes it's junior roles. So you find that in junior roles, they are more, there's a lot more underrepresented groups there. But allyship starts from the top, because the leadership is an example. The leadership is an example and a representation of what the business is and what they're about. If the leader and the face and the CEO and the C-suite, if they are not vocal about inclusion, about making someone feel accepted, or allyship, if they're not vocal about that, and even with action implementing things, then it will start to show. But it's better to do things from the top down than from the ground up. And I think that it definitely starts with leadership. Take the time to educate yourself. But don't depend on underrepresented groups to teach you everything. There are resources, there are books, there are people that you can even pay to teach you things. But yeah, definitely just educate yourself and practice and apply everything that you're learning. It'll make all the difference.